Hey guys, welcome back to the House of Gouldians. This is episode 4 of season 3. Today we've got a particularly long-awaited topic for discussion in our educational segment, and that is that we're going to be discussing lighting in your birdroom. You'll notice that the angle of the camera is a bit different today because I wanted to highlight the fact that there is a skylight and just how much natural light it brings to the room. So you'll see the shadows of my face, the light is coming from above, and then on the other side of the birdroom we've got another solution there. The other part of the episode today is some spy camera footage. So let's have a bit of fun with that and just have a look at our favourite birds, and then we'll come back to the education segment for today. Right, so there's many people who think Gouldian finches cannot raise their own chicks and don't make good parents, and this little bit of spy footage clearly shows differently. So you notice when the chicks are at the hole, in the darkness, those pubescent nodes on the sides of the mouth glow in the dark, if you like, and that's what their intended purpose is to help the parents find their mouths when they're feeding. They like to nest in dark hollows. So yeah, you can see the hen bird's coming along and she's feeding the chicks. There is 6 in this particular nest, although not all of them are visible at once. But yeah, they're all there demanding food, and you can see she's doing a brilliant job of picking a different chick every time. So she's not just feeding one greedy bird and then the others miss out. She's deliberately picking which mouth to feed at the time. And she really did a brilliant job. Her and the cockbird that's in this cage, it's a pair of orange heads, and they've really done a superb job. So I'm quite excited to have their youngsters. They're both part of our sort of quality side, which is the majestic bloodline side. And I'm really hoping that these chicks turn out to be sort of show-winning quality. We do have a lot of work to do, but yeah, we're getting there. You saw her actually climb in the box there, and that was to push past the others and make sure that even those in the back get fed. So yeah, there's absolutely no denying that they can be brilliant parents. Not always, but there are some theories on how you can improve problems that you're having, but we'll discuss those in other episodes. This little chick in particular just fledged after this video, so he sort of sat on the edge here, and it wasn't long after this that he actually then jumped out onto the perch, and that was literally, not only did we see them getting fed, but we saw the very first one fledge, which was great. And that pair did an amazing job. Actually, sorry, that's 6 chicks, there's 6 in total. There was 5 in the video, but there's actually another chick that hadn't shown us off. We've then got a pair behind me here that is busy with 5 chicks, and then numerous other pairs in the room. And if you listen carefully, you will not hear a Bengalese or anything else in the room. This is purely Gouldians. I am going to be getting a handful of zebra finches, which will go against that wall, and it's not to do with the Gouldian finches. I'm not going to be using the zebras for fostering or anything like that. It's purely so that I have a second species when I'm at a show and I'm judging Gouldian. I can then enter some zebra finches on the show, so at least I can contribute to the show in that way as well. So you will hear them going forward. They haven't arrived yet, but that's what that's all about. All right, coming back to the education segment for today. That we were going to talk about lighting in our birdroom. So obviously if it's in an aviary, you've got less of an issue because they're getting lots of natural sunshine. In my birdroom, you will notice that we have lighting in all the cages, and that's throughout. And that serves absolutely no benefit to the bird whatsoever. Now that you might say is a funny thing to say, but those lights are white lights. They are completely the wrong spectrum in terms of the health side of things, and I'm going to get to that now. But they're there for your benefit as the viewer. Okay, I can see into the cages without those lights on, but on camera it was quite difficult. So I'm going to switch them off quickly. Alright, so now you can see what they would look like without it. And as you can see, it's a lot more difficult for you as a viewer to see into the cages. So that's why I have them. Right, so let's put them back on. Alright, So, we've said that these are no good, and that's because they're standard LED lights, white lights, with no health benefits whatsoever. I don't need LEDs or lights with health benefits because I have a skylight above me that extends from the back to the front, and on that side of the bedroom I have a roller door that I can lift up, and I've put a mesh screen there. So over the last couple of weeks I've built the mesh screen, so it wasn't there before, and that's why I haven't been using the roller door. But going forward we will have the roller door open on a nice day that's not windy, although it is a very sheltered area because it opens up into a carport, so there's no risk of rain or anything like that, but I would still only sort of use that door or have it open when it's a nice day. So essentially I'm getting lots and lots of natural light in the room, and that's why we moved from the old bedroom that you guys were used to for season 1 and 2 into this room for season 3. Now, the old bedroom had a single window on the opposite wall to the cages, and that window was great in that it gave us some early morning light, but it had a big tree in front of it, and that caused a lot of shade, so the room never got really that warm, and the room also never got a lot of light. It was always sort of dull and gloomy, and that's one of the main sort of driving forces that I had to move the room into this part of the building, and that's why we've done that. So what is important in terms of lighting? So one of the vet associations around the world for aviculture, I'm talking now, they did some research on it, and they published an article, and that's what a lot of this is based on today. And their research showed that there's two sort of spectrums that's particularly beneficial to the birds. One is UVB and the other is UVA. Now, you also get UVC, but that is mostly wiped out by the ozone layer, so it's not really applicable to sort of things living on our planet as such. There's no kind of need to talk about it one way or another. UVB, however, is critically important for any animal that essentially is reliant on or mammal and sort of terrestrial animals, should I say, in terms of being able to absorb calcium. And the reason for that is that UVB helps mammals and birds and reptiles and that with vitamin D, and vitamin D is the vitamin that helps to our bodies to absorb calcium. So what we're saying is that if you had to give a ton of calcium in the form of eggshells and cuttlefish and oyster shell and whatever other form you're using, and liquid calcium and all that kind of thing, it's not really going to help the bird unless you've got the vitamin D component. Now, you do get artificial vitamin D, and that's what I was doing in the old bedroom, where one of my vitamin supplements I made sure had vitamin D in it, to offset the fact that I didn't have a lot of natural light in it, at least natural bright light in the room for the birds to get it naturally from the sun. So the vitamin D essentially comes from the UVB side of the spectrum, and like I said, that's what's helping the birds with calcium. Now, you might say, well, why do they need that calcium? So your hen birds in particular, when they're egg laying, that calcium's got to come from somewhere for the shell of the egg, and that's essentially taken out of the bird's bone structure, and it leaves your hens in a bit of a precarious position if you're not getting that replaced. And that's why quite often guys that do 3 rounds, you've heard me talk that I only do 1 or 2 rounds in a season per pair. That is the reason why I do that, because I don't want to overstrain the hens. What I've found is if you do go that 3rd round, you don't lose the hens immediately. But then when it comes to the molting season, you have a much higher mortality rate with your hens in particular. The cocks don't seem to be too affected, obviously, because they're not laying the eggs. So, for them, it's less of a problem. But your hens, I found definitely, since I've reduced the number of rounds in a season, I've found I've got far less casualties when it comes to my hens in the molting season. Coming back to the lighting, so other than UVB for vitamin D, what's important and that is our birds see a broader spectrum than we can. So we don't get the benefit of UVA in terms of our visual perception of the world around us. The birds, on the other hand, their vision is slightly different, and they can see into that UVA spectrum. So while it doesn't have a health benefit as such, UVA helps with your pairings of your birds, because your hen birds can see all the beautiful full arrangement of colors that your cock birds have to offer, and they believe that the UVA spectrum also helps them pick up, shall we say, the visual health of the bird. So in other words, the hen's able to pick a partner that's healthier and in better condition, because they have that vision that we don't have. So yeah, it's just something to think about, is that there's not only the benefit of the UVB side, but the UVA also plays a partial role as well. The other thing that they've found is, or we know as Gouldian keepers, not the vets found, but we found as keepers, is that if you have your birds in a dark area and they're not getting enough light, what tends to happen is that you'll start getting birds going melanistic. Now, we've had a show talking about melanism in our Gouldian finches, where we really focused on it, and there was a whole host of possible causes for it, from diet to lack of light, to there was other things as well. I can't remember offhand. I've been caught off guard on that fact, but the point is that there was a spectrum of stuff that they believe could lead to melanism or aggravate melanism in our Gouldians. But one of the main factors that has been proven is a lack of light. So what happens in that scenario is the bird is not getting what it needs from the natural light in your bird room, and as a result they produce a bit more dark pigment in their feathers, which causes those sort of black areas where there shouldn't be black areas, and it's kind of like a counter to the lack of light, because we know that black absorbs more light and heat. So it's one way for them to compensate. So it's important for the Gouldians, it's a proven fact, otherwise the birds wouldn't go melanistic. But it's been scientifically proven as well. And what they did is they looked at it's not Gouldians, but they looked at parrot species from a really heavy foresty area like the Amazon, and then they compared that with some of the parrots from more sort of sparsely vegetated areas from like Australia, for example, where the birds are sort of more in savannas and grassland areas and that kind of thing, and there's big distances between the trees. So as a result, what they found is that the group or species, should I say, of birds that came from high light areas, because they're out in the open and there's no thick tree canopies, had a lot higher, a lot greater requirement, shall we say, for light, because they haven't learned their bodies haven't adapted over the time to cope with low lighting levels. And as a result, when they artificially gave UVB lighting, they found that there was a definite jump in the plasma levels in the bird for that vitamin D when they were exposed to that UVB lighting. Whereas your species of parrot, where they came from a heavy forested area, they were effectively already had the saturation in the plasma of that vitamin D, so they didn't really get the benefit of added artificial vitamin D. And obviously this was control studies where the birds were in the exact same environment. They had essentially given them a deficit of UVB lighting for a time period to see what would happen and all that kind of thing. So yeah, scientifically, in other words, they've proven that if your birds come from, or a species that is exposed to a lot of light in the wild, or direct sunlight in the wild, they're not dappled by through shade, they need that most definitely if you're keeping them in captivity. So the Gouldians, coming back to our hobby, is a species that is in your grassland savanna type areas of Australia. Up in Western Australia, it's very dry at that part of the world, it's an arid area, and as a result they definitely are a species that do need that exposure to UVB lighting in particular for health reasons, and then UVA
assist them in their pairings and choosing a mate and all that kind of thing. So yeah, I hope that's made sense to you. Now we're going to move on to more the type of artificial lighting and the problems that we have currently, and that's why I've gone the skylight route and the door route. So you get different types of globes. You get the screw-in bulb type. Those UVBs, and they come in different strengths. And then you get the tube type, so fluorescent tubes, and they also come in different strengths. Now, the reptile hobby's been dealing with those for a long time. They do have a very short lifespan, if you like, in that over time they start losing their effectiveness. So you do need to change them, and the articles that I've read are talking about as frequently as every 6 months. Now, that's a huge downside for us in the hobby, because if I have to go and change a light per cage, here's a bank of 12. We've then got a whole bunch of cages down that side as well. It's going to be massively cost prohibitive for me as a breeder to be able to do that using artificial UVB lighting. It's just not practical from a cost perspective. So that's the first problem we run into. I'm not saying they won't work. In fact, what they're saying is that your stronger UVB lights, you need a clearance of about 15 centimeters from the top of the bird's head to the light, because you don't want it too close either. And then what the other problem, and that's where I was going next, is that your UVB lights have a max effective range. The artificial lighting, they're still busy improving their technology, so this will improve over time. But unlike the sun, where the birds can be anywhere in the aviary and they're going to get that benefit if there's natural lighting, with the artificial lights, they need to ideally be within less than 60 centimeters of that bulb, because the moment you go beyond that, the effectiveness of that light is minimal. So it's a continuum, so the closer they are, the more benefit, and the further they go, the worse it gets. But once they get past about 60 centimeters, it really has lost the bulk of its effectiveness. So they recommend for a strong type, because you get different strengths, you're talking 15 centimeters from the bird as a minimum. From the head I'm talking, and then about 30 ideally is where the kind of range that you're wanting to be. The other thing that you need to bear in mind with artificial lighting is the bird needs to be able to move away. So in the wild, they'd be able to find a shady spot and get away from that lighting if they've had enough. So in the artificial environment, we want to give them that light gradient as well. So ideally you want your UVB light on the one side so that the bird can go and sit on the opposite side if it's had enough. Now, my cages are quite long, so by the time they're sitting on this side, if I did have an artificial light, they would be pretty much out of its effective range, and therefore they would have a full gradient. If your cages are narrower, you're going to have a problem where the bird can't really get away from the UVB, and they're going to be exposed to it all the time. Now, the other sort of thing that you need to watch for is that continued exposure to UVA in particular, but UVB as well, can cause issues with things like cataracts and that kind of thing if it's continuous. So what they're saying is that UVA lighting, you ideally want a maximum of about 3 to 4 hours a day. So that's just stuff to keep in mind when it comes to your UVB lighting. And if if anyone on the channel would like to read the articles for themselves, if you drop me a comment in the comment section with maybe your email address, I'll happily forward those 2 articles to you. So it's 2 different articles in question. The one about the parrot research in particular, and the other talking specifically from this Agricultural Veterinary Society, their findings on the UVB and UVA lights in particular. So yeah, I hope that's all made sense to you, and if you've got any questions, please feel free. And then also, if you've enjoyed today's episode, please like and subscribe. It does help me in that it then notifies you of future episodes and that kind of thing, which gets our viewership. And then finally, if you are in a position to donate to the channel, we are that money is not used for me personally, it's used to improve our offering to you. We're looking at improving the sound by getting lapel marks that plug into the camera and that kind of thing. So yeah, I hope you've enjoyed that, and we will chat again next episode.